Welcome back to my channel, Voices of Anti-Joy. Today, I have one of those stories that will make you laugh, cringe, and maybe even hide behind your hands in second-hand embarrassment. It's about Josephine and how one sleepy, wine-tinted airplane ride turned into one of the most awkward minutes of her entire life. If you've ever had a mix-up that left you wanting the floor to swallow you whole, this one will make you feel less alone. So buckle in, tray tables up, because we're heading straight into Josephine's most unforgettable flight. Before we dive in, let me quickly say this. My dear viewers, if you enjoy stories that make you feel, stories that make you giggle, and stories that remind you how human we all are, please, I truly plead with you, don't forget to like this video right now and subscribe to Voices of Anti-Joy. It means the world to me, and it's the only way you'll never miss any of the heartwarming, funny, and surprising story times we share here every week. Go ahead, tap that button, and let's keep building this wonderful family together. Alright, now back to Josephine. Let me set the scene. It was a red-eye flight, the kind where the cabin lights are dim. Most passengers are tucked into their blankets, and the quiet hum of the engines feels like a lullaby. Josephine had been traveling for work all week, rushing through meetings, airports, and late hotel nights. She was exhausted, the kind of tired that makes your brain feel like it's wrapped in fog. Before boarding, she'd even treated herself to a couple of those tiny plastic glasses of boxed wine. Not too much, just enough to take the edge off her nerves. Finally, for the first time all week, she felt ready to relax. But Josephine wasn't just tired. She was also a little emotional. Earlier that evening, she'd spoken with her boyfriend. Their conversation hadn't gone smoothly. They'd been arguing over small things lately, and that call left her wistful and uneasy. As she sat in her cramped middle seat, she tried to push it out of her mind, to focus on just getting home. That's when she noticed the man beside her. He looked oddly familiar, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the same jacket she remembered from boarding, headphones resting snugly over his ears. His head was tilted to the side, as if he were drifting in and out of sleep. In the half-darkness of the cabin, Josephine's tired mind began to play tricks on her. He looked comforting. He looked like someone she'd been thinking about all week. With the drone of the engines and the warmth of the wine, Josephine told herself, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's harmless if I lean closer. Just for a second. She wasn't the kind of person who usually acted on impulse. She was cautious, the kind who made lists for everything and stuck to them. But that night, something in the quiet of row 14 made her braver, or maybe sillier, than usual. Heart pounding, Josephine leaned in. The moment stretched thin, like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. She noticed the curve of his jaw, the soft light from a nearby lamp, catching the edge of his jacket. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. And then she kissed him, just a quick, tentative brush of lips. It wasn't bold. It wasn't dramatic, it was small. Almost like a secret. For a second, relief rushed through her. She thought she had finally done something that gave her comfort. Something that closed the gap between loneliness and connection. But then a voice. From just behind her came a low, startled murmur. Wait, what was that? Josephine froze, her face flushed hot, her stomach flipped, and the relief she'd felt vanished instantly. The man beside her stirred only slightly, shifting in his seat, adjusting his headphones, still half asleep and unaware. He hadn't reacted, he hadn't even noticed. And that was the moment Josephine realized something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Josephine sat frozen in her seat, her pulse thundering in her ears, louder than the engines outside. The voice from behind her still echoed. Wait, what was that? She dared not turn around immediately. Every instinct told her that if she stayed perfectly still, maybe, just maybe, this moment would dissolve into the darkness. And no one would notice, but she knew better. Airplanes have a way of shrinking your world into a tiny bubble. And inside that bubble, everything feels amplified. She straightened up quickly, cheeks hot, lips pressed tight together, as though she could hide what she had just done. The man beside her, the one she thought she recognized, was still half asleep. Headphones clinging on, head lolling gently as the plane rocked. He hadn't even opened his eyes. That should have been comforting. It wasn't, it was worse. Because the real problem was the owner of that startled voice. The man sitting 2 rows back. Josephine heard the shuffle of someone leaning forward. And then she felt eyes on her, sharp and questioning. She risked a glance over her shoulder, and there he was. A tall man, his face just visible in the cabin's soft light, brows drawn together in confusion. Her stomach dropped. It was him. The man she thought was beside her. The one she had convinced herself was familiar. Only he wasn't sitting next to her at all. He was 2 rows back, awake now. staring directly at her, as if he had just witnessed a scene from a bizarre in-flight comedy. Josephine whipped her head back around so fast her neck cracked. Her mind was racing. Oh no, oh no. No, no, what have I done? She wanted to sink into the thin airplane cushion and disappear. She wanted the pilot to open a secret trapdoor and let her parachute out into the night sky. Anything would be better than this boiling embarrassment. But the night wasn't about to grant her mercy. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Another passenger nearby had noticed. A woman in the aisle seat across from her was peeking curiously, eyes wide, whispering something to the man beside her. Then Josephine caught it, the faint glow of a phone camera switching on. Someone was recording. Her heart lurched. Please no, not this, not the internet. She forced herself to do the only thing she could think of. Damage control. She leaned slightly toward the man she'd accidentally kissed, the sleeping stranger, and whispered, I am so sorry, but he didn't stir. Not even a twitch. Either the man was the deepest sleeper on earth, or he was pretending not to notice. Honestly, Josephine couldn't blame him. The voice from behind came again, louder this time but not angry. Just baffled, Miss, do I know you? That was the breaking point. A few heads turned. The quiet of the red-eye flight, once so peaceful, was cracking under the weight of awkwardness. Josephine forced a nervous laugh, the kind that doesn't sound natural at all. No, sorry, my mistake. Just tired. Her words came out in a tumble, fast and flimsy, like paper shields against a storm. But the attention didn't fade. The curious stares lingered. And now, a flight attendant was walking slowly down the aisle, the reflective stripes on her vest catching the dim cabin lights as she approached. Josephine felt her throat tighten. Flight attendants are the calmest people on earth, but they can also sense trouble like radar. And Josephine knew she looked like a flashing signal. In that moment, a dozen thoughts collided in her head. What if she got in trouble? What if she was asked to move seats? What if the entire plane thought she was some kind of reckless troublemaker? Worst of all, what if her boyfriend ever found out about this? Her hands gripped the armrests, sweaty palms sticking against the plastic. She squeezed her eyes shut for half a second, wishing she could rewind time just 5 minutes. If only she had kept to herself. If only she had curled up under the thin airline blanket and dozed like everyone else. But life doesn't hand out rewinds, it hands out consequences. And Josephine was just beginning to realize that her little midnight impulse might spiral into something much bigger than she ever imagined. The flight attendant stopped right beside Josephine's row. Her smile was professional but thin, the kind of smile that said, I'm here to help, but I already know something's off. She crouched slightly so her voice wouldn't carry, though Josephine could still feel the curious eyes of at least 5 passengers burning into her back. Ma'am, the attendant said softly, is everything all right here? Josephine's throat tightened. Her tongue felt glued to the roof of her mouth. For a second, she thought about denying everything, brushing it off, pretending the last 60 seconds hadn't happened. But then the voice from behind her spoke again, breaking the silence. She leaned forward and the man stopped mid-sentence, clearly unsure how much detail to give in front of everyone. His tone wasn't angry, just unsettled. And that made it worse. If he had shouted, Josephine might have had something to push back against. But quiet confusion, that pierced right through her. The attendant nodded once and looked back at Josephine. Ma'am, can I ask you to step into the aisle with me for a moment? Oh no, the words every passenger dreads. Josephine wanted to vanish, to crawl under her seat like a loose carry-on bag. But she knew refusing would make everything worse. Slowly, with trembling hands, she unclipped her seatbelt and stood. The blanket slipped off her lap and crumpled on the floor. The walk into the aisle felt longer than any runway she'd ever crossed. As soon as she stood, she caught a glimpse of the recording phone again. Someone angled it slightly lower, but Josephine could tell they weren't about to delete it. She whispered under her breath, please don't let this end up online. The flight attendant guided her a few steps toward the galley, where the lighting was brighter. There, with arms folded and eyebrows arched just slightly, the attendant leaned in. I need to ask, what just happened back there? Josephine's chest tightened. She couldn't lie, at least not convincingly. Her voice cracked as she whispered, it was a mistake, I thought. I thought he was someone else. The attendant's eyes softened, but only a little. Ma'am, you can't lean over and touch another passenger without their permission. That makes people uncomfortable. I need you to understand that. I know, Josephine said quickly, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. I wasn't thinking, I was tired. I'd had a little wine, She cut herself off. Excuses wouldn't save her. I'm so sorry. The attendant sighed, nodding. Okay, I appreciate your honesty. I'll speak with the gentleman who raised the concern. But for the rest of the flight, please stay in your seat and give everyone their space. We don't want this escalating, understood? Yes, absolutely. I swear it won't happen again. Josephine whispered, her voice trembling. The attendant gave a small, tight smile and gestured back toward her seat. The walk back felt like a slow march of shame. Every step made her skin burn hotter. She lowered herself into the middle seat again, avoiding everyone's eyes. The man beside her was still asleep, or at least pretending with the skill of an actor who deserved an award. But 2 rows back, she could feel the real man's gaze. Not angry now, just puzzled, maybe disappointed. She dared not look directly at him. Instead, she sank into her seat, clutching the flimsy blanket like it could shield her from reality. Minutes dragged on, each second a reminder of her mistake. Josephine thought about her boyfriend again. How could she ever explain this? Would she even try? She pictured the conversation. Hi, honey, funny story. I accidentally kissed a stranger on a plane. The thought made her stomach twist. She thought about the recording. What if it spread? What if her coworkers saw it? What if strangers online turned her embarrassment into memes? She groaned softly and pulled the blanket up over her head. In that dark little cocoon, Josephine faced the truth. She had acted carelessly, and now she had no control over how others saw her. The flight wasn't even halfway over, and already it felt like the longest journey of her life. And somewhere between the steady drone of the engines and the whispers still rippling through the cabin, Josephine realized this was no longer just a funny mix-up. It was becoming a lesson she wasn't ready to learn, but one she couldn't escape. Josephine tried to disappear into her seat, but disappearing wasn't an option on a plane. The rows were too close, the air too thin, and the weight of what she'd done pressed down harder than the cabin pressure. Every few seconds, she dared to glance around, only to see quick turns of heads and hushed whispers. Word of her mistake was traveling through row after row like gossip in a school cafeteria. She closed her eyes, willing herself to sleep, but her body was buzzing too much to relax. The blanket over her shoulders felt scratchy instead of soft, and every sound, the rustle of snack wrappers, the ding of a seatbelt sign, the quiet cough of a passenger made her jump. Then it happened. A voice cleared its throat behind her, low, steady, and unmistakably directed at her. Excuse me, miss. Her stomach knotted, slowly, painfully. She turned in her seat. The man she thought she had kissed, the actual man from 2 rows back, was leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on her. Not furious, not mocking, just serious and maybe a little confused. Josephine swallowed hard. Why, yes. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. I need to ask, did you mean to do that? Back there, his voice was calm. Almost too calm, like he was trying to keep the whole plane from hearing. Her cheeks flamed. No, I mean yes, I mean. The words tangled in her mouth. It was a mistake. I thought you were someone else. I swear, I wasn't trying to bother you. For a moment, he didn't respond. He just blinked, then let out a short, incredulous laugh, the kind that said, "You've got to be kidding me." Well, he said finally, you certainly surprised me. She wanted to vanish into her seat cushion. I am so sorry, she whispered. It won't happen again. The man leaned back, shaking his head slightly, and Josephine thought that was the end of it. But then he leaned forward again, lowering his voice. You should be more careful. My wife is sitting 2 rows up. If she had seen, he cut himself off, running a hand down his face. Josephine's blood turned cold. She hadn't seen a wife. She hadn't thought about anyone else at all. The enormity of what she'd done hit her like turbulence. This wasn't just embarrassing. It could have caused real damage. Her throat tightened. I didn't know. She stammered. I wasn't thinking. Clearly, he muttered, though not cruelly. Just matter of fact. Then he sighed, settling back into his seat. Look, I don't want to make a scene. Just let's leave it at that. Relief and shame crashed into Josephine at the same time. She nodded furiously, her eyes stinging with tears. Yes, thank you. I promise nothing like this will ever happen again. The man gave a short nod, then leaned back, pulling out a book, as though the conversation were already over. But for Josephine, it was far from over. She turned back around, her mind spiraling. The mention of his wife replayed in her head, over and over. She pictured herself from the outside, a tired, emotional traveler making a reckless mistake that could have broken someone else's trust. It wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't just cringeworthy. It was dangerous, careless, and selfish. Her chest ached with the weight of it. She wanted to do more than whisper apologies into the recycled airplane air. She wanted to fix it. But how do you fix something you can't take back? The rest of the cabin had mostly calmed down. People returned to their movies, their naps, their crossword puzzles. But Josephine felt like she was the only one still trapped in that moment. Her mistake sat heavy on her shoulders, making every minute feel like an hour. And somewhere, deep down, she knew this wouldn't stay contained to the flight. Sooner or later, she would have to tell her boyfriend. And when that day came, this one awkward, painful mistake would test her honesty more than anything else ever had. For the rest of the flight, Josephine sat as still as she could, hands folded tight in her lap, heart still rattling like loose luggage in an overhead bin. She didn't move, she didn't lean. She didn't even look around. Every second that passed felt like a reminder of what she had done and what it could have cost. By the time the captain announced their descent, Josephine's emotions had traveled through every possible stop. Panic, embarrassment, regret, and finally, a quiet kind of acceptance. There was no undoing the kiss. No magic reset button to erase the recording, the whispers, or the memory of the man's words. "My wife is sitting 2 rows up." That sentence would live rent-free in her mind forever. When the plane landed and the seatbelt signs chimed off, Josephine stayed seated, waiting until most passengers had shuffled down the narrow aisle before she stood. She didn't want more eyes on her, didn't want more murmurs or curious glances. As she stepped off the plane and into the brightness of the terminal, she felt as though she had just walked out of a spotlight and back into ordinary life. But ordinary life wasn't so simple. Later that night, in the quiet of her hotel room, Josephine knew she couldn't just bury the story. She had to face it. She picked up her phone, staring at the contact she'd been dreading to call. Her boyfriend. Her thumb hovered over the button. She knew what she had to do, tell the truth. Not the watered-down version. Not the funny mix-up excuse. The truth. And so she did. Her voice shook. Her words came haltingly, but she told him everything. About being tired. About thinking she recognized someone she didn't. About leaning over and making a terrible mistake. She expected shouting. She expected the end of the relationship right then and there. But what she got instead was silence. A long, heavy silence. Then a sigh. And finally, a quiet response. "Josephine, do you realize how serious that was?" She did, more than she could put into words. She apologized again, not just once, but over and over, until her throat felt raw. Whether forgiveness would come or not, she didn't know. But she understood something that mattered more than saving face. She had learned a lesson she'd carry with her forever. And that's where the story lands. Right here with us. Josephine's embarrassing airplane moment wasn't just about awkwardness. It was about responsibility. About understanding that our choices, even small ones made in foggy moments, can affect other people in ways we never intend. She learned that consent isn't optional, that assumptions can be dangerous, and that apologies mean more when they come with honesty and accountability. Now, my dear viewers, let me pause and speak directly to you. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with Josephine's story. And I plead with you, please, if you enjoy story times like this, full of real lessons, wrapped in laughter and emotion, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Voices of Anti-Joy, and ring that bell so you never miss a moment. This channel is built on stories that remind us we're all human, that mistakes happen, and that what matters most is what we learn from them. I also want to hear from you. Have you ever made a mistake in public that left you red-faced for days? Something small that grew into a big memory you'll never forget. Share it in the comments below. I'll be reading through, and who knows, your story might be featured in a future video. So, what started as one of Josephine's most cringeworthy minutes in the sky ended as one of the most important lessons of her life. We all have moments we wish we could take back, but as Josephine shows us, the real growth comes when we own them, face the consequences, and try to do better the next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting Voices of Anti-Joy. And remember, awkward stories don't define us. They shape us. Until next time, stay kind, stay thoughtful, and stay tuned for the next story time.